Try my best.
My name's Dusty Rhodes, and I've lived in Bradford since I came here as a student in 1969. Well, Bradford is and was an exciting place back then as well. And I came here ostensibly to study chemistry at the university, but as soon as I arrived, I was knocked out by the amount of artistic stuff that was going on, both at the university and the college. And the stuff at the college was led by people that I soon became aware were sort of luminaries of the artistic and theatrical world, and they were very politicised as well. And I was interested as a 19-year-old arriving here in the politics and what was going on. The Vietnam War was being campaigned against and all sorts of stuff like that. So people who were doing theatrics and activism and interventions and political stuff all at once was very appealing to me, and I soon left chemistry behind and started really just doing art and politics.
Yep, my name's Sumray, and I don't know, you could call me an artist, but I don't really believe in labels, but I live in Bradford.
My name's Harry Kingham, and what do I do? That's a good question. I'm self-employed, which means I can do whatever I like.
Well, I'm Bev Morton. But what else?
I'm Abbot. I'm an artist. I live in Bradford, and I play music as well. I do a bit of writing, and I produce music and visual arts at University of Bradford.
My name is Ruth Fettis. I'm a printmaker, and I work as I work for anybody really. You know, I'm freelance community, whatever you want to call it, working with people, artists and residents, anything really, you know.
Say I don't believe in labels. You have to use labels sometimes. People like descriptions. Community artist, yeah, I live in the community. Does that count? I work in the community, yeah. I think that's one of the things I could be called, community artist.
Yeah, I often call myself a community artist, especially to insurance companies, because I once tried to, as a juggler, I once tried to tell the car insurance people that I was a performer, and my car insurance was quadrupled or something. So now I like to say I'm a community artist, and it's becoming more and more true, I think.
Are you a community artist?
I suppose, yes, that's what I would. I've worked for many years in the community.
No, I don't really use the word community art, but I do art that involves or creates different sorts of communities.
Why is that not a community artist?
I think community art sort of delineates a particular type of practice that I think it's good to keep open.
I suppose I am somebody who makes that happen for other people. So I used to be an artist 25 years ago, and then there was a point where I realised that if I wanted to make a living, because I was a single parent with a young baby, that what I needed to do was get more secure income, and I felt there was a lot of artists around, and there wasn't many people who organised stuff. And although there was the festival was only doing work within the festival time. And so I went to Dusty Rhodes and said, if I set up a company that did community arts, would you join the board? And he said yes. And so I set up Artworks. So that's kind of how it happened. So it's funny because I was just thinking about it today, because I don't know where my relationship is to being an artist anymore. Because I started out as an artist, but I don't identify myself as an artist anymore. I miss it off. And then somebody will say, what, didn't you used to be an artist? And then I go, oh God, yeah, I did, didn't I?
Coming to Bradford, it's been more about, I'd still say it's community, but more about occupying buildings and different types of buildings and making that a place where things can happen. And that is either through developing audiences for the Playhouse. Did that for a year and a half. And that was a place, it was interesting because you'd want the different tribes to come. So you'd have the DIY crowd, the music crowd, the DIY music crowd, the Leeds music crowd, but then also people who volunteered there who hid the fact that they'd been writing poetry for months and stuffed it under the bed and firmly rejected being called an artist. And then within a couple of months, because it was an inclusive environment, you'd find out all this stuff come out, you know. And really, it's that I enjoyed creating an environment where it was okay for people to let that out themselves and then feel ownership of the word artist. And yeah, so I've been in various different spaces. So not necessarily like a facilitator, but a programme manager or even an administrator in the office, like just all feeding into an environment where people can feel included.
I think a lot of the time community arts is seen as a very sort of instrumentalised type of practice that has a specific set of aims that are more about fixing things rather than criticising things, or creating short-term fixes rather than kind of addressing long-term sort of problems. But you know, like I say, it doesn't exclude kind of community arts, and there's a lot of good stuff in that as well.
I make art for myself, but I also make art with other people, and I consider it all part of my artistic practice. But I suppose if you're thinking about my studio work, which is just my solo work, really, I'm primarily a painter, lots of drawings. I've just started getting into animation, that kind of thing.
What about with other people?
I suppose drawing is a passion, but that doesn't necessarily mean with a pencil. It could mean with your fingers in the air or invading a space with your body, but drawing is a basis of, I think everybody should draw. Everybody can draw.
Well, I think that's where I got to. I realised there's some kind of creative magic in that other people weren't able to do. This was kind of my contribution. Didn't have to be about working with people in the sessions and making the art. My contribution, that was only mine, was about raising the money, getting the infrastructure in place, organising the people, getting the board, making it all work, paying the people the money, getting the money from sources of income that previously it had never happened. I mean, you know, when I started Artworks, the festival was the biggest source of income coming into the arts in Bradford. and then we started getting European funding from like large sums of money from the Arts Council. And for an artist development programme, we raised £370,000. So that was, there was multiple noughts on the end of the amount of money that previously was a lot less. And so I saw that as enabling other people's work. So we were employing artists from all over the place, and we were trying to employ as many artists as we possibly could from the Bradford area. And that's why we developed the RISE programme, to develop artists, to help build the work, really.
Where I did the electric fireside, which was a hyper-real fireside, and we gathered around it with poetry and song, and we took it to Lumiere in Durham, and I worked with 3 different communities, ex-mining communities, intergenerational, older generations, and and it was through like we really with the music, even the soundtracks we were going to play, we were going to have some music, it had to be their playlist. And in some ways it was a bit scary, because like one of the playlists, it was like Pitbull and J-Lo and stuff like that, and it was like, I don't like that. And I was tempted to want to curate it, but actually I'm so glad we didn't, because when it came to their night and the installation was there, and we were when the community came and surrounded themselves around this hyperreal installation, which was a bit weird, we do that every day, but other people don't, the fact that it was their playlist and everybody just started dancing, it was like, way, and it was like, oh my God, and just the weeks leading up, us constantly saying, this is your night, this is ours, this is us, having that playlist, being their stories, and it happened. People felt really safe, people were spontaneously dancing, and invited their friends and families to sing. And keeping your word, I think. Say what you mean, don't make any false promises. Because I think communities that have been, especially the white mining communities up in North East, they were really quite, I didn't know they were watching that, but when we came true on our promises, they were like, it was like, right, okay, you've been failed quite a lot, even by artists.
And we did a project where we went out into the street, and we went to all the shops on Otley Road, which you'll know, and we interviewed all the shopkeepers, and then we all did big portraits of the shopkeepers in their shops, and we put them all in the shop windows all along Otley Road. I really like the idea of actually bringing art into the community in a practical way as well, but I think it's got offshoots just in confidence building, it's not everyone can draw. I don't like the idea that there's this little hallowed group of like the artists, I think it's just purely opportunity. Some people have better skills than others, but given the confidence, everybody can draw.
Often with community groups, schools where we go into community groups, and we work with people to build their own little lantern, which they carry on a stick, which is lit with a candle inside. It's made of willow and tissue paper and lit from inside with a candle. But we also build these big characters that are also lit up, which are puppets because they move and again have characters. So although they're lanterns, they're also puppets, if you so to mean.
And I did this show, so I'd done a fashion show with professional designers, and I said to Alan and Dusty, I want to do it with ordinary people, because there's creativity everywhere. And in my mind's eye, I think what I was trying to find was the people who were like I had been as a child, people who had all this creativity in them and had no means to either develop it or express it. And it's amazing when you go along, you get introduced to somebody and you say, this is what I want to do, and then they say yes. It was just absolutely phenomenal. And and I said, we worked out it was going to cost 11,000 quid. And Dusty went, yeah, but not a penny more.
I worked with a guy called Adam Benjamin, and he introduced me to dance and disability and improvisation, and it allowed disabled bodies and non-disabled bodies to dance together and have their own art form. So nobody was pretending to do ballet. Ballet is a very specific body. You train for a long time to get a body. But this was like, and it just taught me so many things. And I did that at a community level, in the sense of working with people in the community who hadn't done this before, to what you'd call, I guess, professional level.
All of my relationships with everybody, my class assumptions about who I was and where I came from and what I believed in, about my sexuality, about how I expressed that, my relationships with people, whether I was or was not the oppressor, and if I was the oppressor, how to address myself about that as well, and how to so as a bloke, a lot of the women that I was with, including my then girlfriends and whatever else, were sort of, saying, wagging their fingers at me and saying, you are oppressive for the following reasons. Well, I ended up having to address those issues, and it changed me as a person. Because you can only change yourself if you understand what the changes that are needed, and the only way to work that out is to have a revolution within yourself, isn't it? It's about sort of trying to unravel the package that you've inherited and remake yourself.
That's really important. That's just you don't do the washing up to get the dishes clean, you do the washing up to actually be there doing the washing up. And if you can, and actually I think part of my human condition makes me want to get to the next place, get to where the grass is greener, not be present in here, which doesn't seem quite as good as somewhere else. So therefore, but that's a real danger. Maybe what stops me turning up to do the shadow puppets, for example, is I might not be good enough. I'm going to have to. I don't quite know what I'm doing. I want to be really good. I want to be that place where I'm. It's just ego stuff, isn't it? It's bollocks, really. It's. I've got this vision for what I want it to be, and actually getting from A to B, I forget to actually be in the moment of just trying out the first steps. I want to be running before I can walk, and actually I've got to just try something really basic and simple.
Working in Bradford, it just blew me away. I think it's radical history, it's DIY. I was hooked. The fact that, when you made art in Bradford, it is more political because you're doing it for your city. Like when I was making art in Newcastle or even Manchester, maybe less so, but it was okay. It's not the underdog where I came back to Bradford, it had a massive hole in it, and I was gobsmacked, and it was my hometown, and just sort of, so everything I've done in Bradford, either on the community level, in traditional workshops, to creating audiences, and truly understanding, this is it, truly understanding public engagement and truly understanding how to give empowerment to other people.
What is art? What is art? I suppose it's... I don't know, what do you think art is?
They asked me this in my university interview.
Did they?
And I said that I didn't know.
What is art? I mean, I suppose that again can be a label to something. It's something that maybe you can do. What is art? No, you might have to ask me later. What is art? Have you got any other ideas now, what art is? How you describe it?
There's some sort of art theory definitions of like what makes an art, and like if it's composed, if it's this, if it's that, but kind of is all encompassing of just like everything, like a tree.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it is recognising something. I mean, I don't mean literally. I don't mean, oh yeah, that's a house. I don't mean that, but actually it is taking it away from something, and whether it's just watching the way that pigeon is walking around there and recognising the pattern it's making, and maybe either in your head or someone else's head. So it's not, I don't know what is art. I might have to, haven't been asked that for a while.
I think that I define it as something that helps you to see the world in a different way.
Anything that helps you see the world in a different way.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
What is art?
Oh, bloody hell. I really don't know.
It's an extension of your own self. Just at different layers of abstraction.
What is art?
Art is everywhere. Art is inspiration. Art is just everything you look at, everything you hear, everything you see, the relationships you make with people, the things you think, the things you talk about, the things you wear, the things you sit on, the food you eat. Art's everywhere. Inspiration.
At its best, it's when what I would hope to is allow myself almost to be a vessel for some creative spirit to come into, to birth itself into being in the world. There you go.
I mean, for one thing, it's a language that doesn't need a comprehension in terms of translation. From example, I've just been working with some Brazilians, and there was obviously a language barrier in terms of English and Portuguese, but through drawing we crossed over that. So it can bring people together that wouldn't necessarily feel that they could talk or communicate. And I think it brings together, I think it's a level, I hate the expression level playing field, but I mean, people get freaked out with art, with drawing. Their drawing isn't as good as mine. But actually, you can dispel that, and I think it does bring people together in a shared affirmation of being alive for a bit.
Art is also play, I think. That's part of the expression, I think. Creative self-expression, freedom of creative self-expression, something like that. And playing is a big part of that. And as adults, giving adults license to play a little bit, I think, you're touching on art there. I don't think art's something that... Art for me is also freeing up the frames that we put around art in inverted commas. So a lot of art gets packaged into museums and onto theatre stages, and is seen as an elitist thing, and nearly all the adults we work with in the adults group say, I'm not an artist, I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't sing, I can't whatever. There's so much self-criticism and self-censorship that goes on. Art is about freeing yourself from that censorship, that self-imposed censorship, which has maybe been imposed by other outside figures, but then gets internalised by us. So art is whenever you allow yourself to play, whether that's with paints or colours or a ball or something, you're beginning to get into art.
That whole thing of going back to kind of cave paintings and, by drawing the buffalo or whatever. I mean, obviously we don't know why people did it, but actually it does externalise and visualise something in some way that means that, yeah.
I think community is people and the connections between them. Whether those are connections which are strong or weak or in opposition, it's about the meaning that happens between people, I think.
Well, I think any group of people that come together because they have a shared view or value or an identity that they share form a community. And as far as I'm concerned, one can be a member of lots and lots and lots of different communities. You can share something about your sexuality, you can share something about your gender, you can share something about your economic position, you can share something about any number of things. You could be a bunch of philatelists. That's a community of people as far as I'm concerned. And I wouldn't challenge anybody who stood up and said, I want to say that I'm a member of this community. Well, fair enough. Why should anybody interfere with that view? If that's how you identify yourself, that's cool with me. Now, what is it that you want to say artistically as a result of that perspective?
Community, to me, is a group of people supporting each other. And so you can, in one large community, you get little pockets of communities, don't you? Helping each other out, or there's good and bad in a community as well. Picking up litter, starting a garden on top of a rubbish dump. It's just happened in our community. Sidwick Crest, give it a mention. should be at the focal point of any community?
Togetherness, I guess. Community. Sharing, being a human being. Community. Not be every community. Accepting what? It's a wholeness, isn't it? Where everything can be included. I don't know. Community, collection, people, but it doesn't have to be people, does it?
Can you think of examples of communities and like why they're communities or not?
I mean, I've just recently been on this residential where we were talking about community of artists, and that slightly made me shiver a bit. Because, I mean, we had this discussion that actually I don't really... You get a collection of artists, but actually I think community would disallow other people, and I think communities shouldn't really exclude other people. But I suppose a community... I mean, Bradford, you could say, is a community, but within Bradford there is lots of different communities, and whether they're religiously connected or socially connected, class... differences?
Yeah, it's hard to talk about. I mean, community sounds like a sort of like almost like a sense or a feeling, community, just the word, is almost like a sense of shared belonging. I guess you can talk about communities and kind of different types of communities, which might be to do with geography or communities of interest or sort of background as well. But yeah, I think they're as they ought to be, very sort of plastic and shifting sort of like words.
Community is interacting with other people through specific location or through specific some unifying factor, I think, some common denominator or some shared interest.
Communal. Yeah, things that are communal are things that we share. Yeah, so in that sense, when I was talking earlier on about identity and things like that, it's about shared values, I guess. Now, within any group of people that you could say share a value, you'll find all sorts of groups of people who are dissenting about other things within it.
I mean, earlier we were talking about the festival. There was something completely special and unique about the way that the festival emerged at that time in Bradford, and the way that all of those conditions were present, where if you did an analysis you would go, well, there was no money, there wasn't that many people, there'd never been anything like this before happening, and so how could you make that happen? Well, actually using the energy and positivity and strength and imagination of the people that were around made things possible. And I think one of the things that's happened in the past is we can get so excited about possibility and we forget to look at the ground around what's happening in reality. And if we don't work with the conditions at present in any community, then we miss a huge part of the equation in the ecology, which makes a difference to what we can achieve. So although what I'm not saying is just always look at your feet, you do have to look around you. And that's one of the things that I think I really, really value about community arts practice, because if you try to do something too up its arse in a community, they'll just tell you to fuck off. Because it's an insult, they will just, they might not say it to your face, but it will be manifest in their absence, in their lack of engagement or whatever it is. So they won't, people in communities won't put up with the rubbish that the arts establishment can throw out, because it's so up its own backside. And I really, really appreciate that. I really appreciate it.
That sort of sense of creating a festival that was by and for the people of Bradford and allowing it to be a vehicle for their self-expression, was important. And I felt that, in that sense of, is that a positive thing? Well, yes, I think it is, because, if people if people can establish a common identity as Bradfordians and feel relaxed and easy and good about themselves, find an expression that identifies them in some way or the other, and that they feel makes them proud of themselves and facing the world with that strength and confidence that gives them, then I think that that's a powerful thing.
Basically, I do what I do because I really enjoy doing it, so it benefits me. I'm quite selfish in that sense, or at least, and maybe that's not selfish. Maybe that's just, I don't think it's selfish to do something you love. I think that's really important. It's really hard to kind of try and evaluate how much community groups benefit from the work we do.
I hope that the art that I create, also sort of facilitate for others, creates a space for thinking critically about the world as it is and coming up with alternatives for it. So the sort of benefits are hopefully a better world for people to live in.
By having a parade going through our streets, or in our local park, I think that gives everybody who's there, if we enjoy it, our enjoyment, our participation in the project, even if that's just by coming along and watching a lantern parade, say if we go, oh wow, that looks great, or isn't that, oh I really enjoyed that the fact that that's happening in my neighbourhood, therefore then gives me a sense of I value living here, and I actually think that's something that we could all do with, because it gives us more pride in where we live, therefore gives us more desire to stay where we are, rather than thinking that the grass is always greener on the other side, wherever that might be.
Generally, I mean, the world's really fucked, isn't it? So we need something new, and it needs to be sort of we need to collectively work to improve things for the largest amount of people possible. But it is always a struggle, and it is always sort of striving to do something. And I think over time I've sort of come to terms with the idea that it can only be a kind of, or certainly art, if we're talking about art practice, can be a site for experimentation around that sort of thing. But you can't, or maybe shouldn't, evaluate it purely on whether it successfully creates that kind of completely participatory environment, because otherwise it's always deemed to failure.
They do a certain amount of art, but actually it's a natter group, really. They come along and they talk all about their problems and their depression and their this and their that, and it's a space for them to make friendships, which is great because that's ticking all our funding boxes. So
the impact is more real, and I worked with a refugee group at Artworks last summer, and we all went to the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and I just had a chat with these two sisters, and it blew my mind because we were both sat there, we both had a cup of tea, and they'd been on a really bad journey, and through art we could just chat about it a little bit, but it was just as much as a moment for me. It was like, you've been on this terrible journey, we've come to this point where we're meeting, but now when I see refugee or in the newspaper, my opinion's completely changed, and I'm changed, and I live in this city. I'm not separate because I'm an artist.
Okay, so it's just so hard to quantify it. I'd say the young people benefit, even if we're just opening a youth club on a Wednesday night, so they've got somewhere to go that's not out in the cold, dark streets.
It kind of felt like there was some part of me missing out of it. The heart and the soul wasn't there. And then when I realised actually it's about art and people in art and where they are in relation to themselves and the place that they live, then that's when I kind of went, well, that's the space that only I want to be in, So and so then it was changing me, and it was changing the people around me. It was changing the people that we were working with, and it was changing their families and their friends, and they were beginning to be different people. And we had loads of people who previously had had no experience that then began to be workshop assistants, and then developed themselves and became artists, and then ran workshops. And then when I developed over the years of developing artworks, then we had a whole community of people who would work with us and for lots of other people. So we were kind of like connectors of people and potential opportunities.
I suppose basically a lot of the time I work with adults, they say I can't draw, and of course they can. They've somehow, I don't know what system has knocked it out of them a bit, because you wouldn't get a 4-year-old saying they can't. So I suppose a lot of it's like about building confidences in people to believe that they can do something, that actually, and I think it's a language that everybody should use, and it doesn't have to be about art, it could be about doodling and thinking, or everything around us. If we look around now, everything around us that is not natural and not organic has been drawn before it was created. So I think drawing should be very much part of our lives. And I don't think it should be separated into art. It should be in science. It's all mixed in.
Not only am I facilitating where the community comes to me, since working in Bradford, I've been going into people's communities, and I always see it as an exchange and a collaboration. And I always, recently, been talking a lot about don't expect people to say, oh, thank you for the art. The artist needs to thank the community for letting them come in as well and play.
I think saying, oh, that's great, isn't actually very useful. It needs something more, but obviously it depends on the situation.
The way it worked was, so I was brought up in a housing estate in a single parent family with 5 kids with no money, and we had no cultural opportunities. So in the early 1960s, there was nothing happening, nothing. And the thing that started my interest and my engagement was the Women's Institute, where all the women off our estate, that was the one thing they did every week, was get together. And they brought their kids with them. And then they'd have pantomimes and shows and stuff like that. And none of it was... There wasn't a professional within 50 miles of that work. Everything was designed by the women. Every performance was performed by the women. All of the costumes, sets, everything were done by that community. And I think that's where the seeds were sown.
I think it's important in terms of people's well-being, the community's well-being. Actually when people are making art, whatever you want to call art, there is so obviously people need to eat and have shelter and be safe, and all those kind of things are a priority. But actually, it's like the people that have taken drawing to the jungle in Calais or something like that, and it just gives people in really dark circumstances, and drawing can just fulfill something that is everybody's able to do. So give you value in a way.
I think we can only look at individuals and how individuals develop through what we do, and that's... I don't even know how we measure that.
Well, if enough people believe in themselves, then they won't stand up for the shit, I suppose. I don't know.
Sometimes it's quite hard. It's not usually the people you're working with, the people you work for. Some people, they just want, say, a school decorated or something like that,
So we've just decided not to open the club up to anyone who wants to come in, but to say, yes, you can come in, but your behaviour has to be quite seriously curtailed, in the sense that you can't just run riot. You have to join in, actually, is what we're saying, and you have to cooperate. And that's... So we're not reaching some of the kids that are really crying out for something, But we are reaching some of the kids who are also needing something and wanting something because they're coming back. And I think we're seeing those kids develop.
I think you have to be really careful. I think as a community artist, or as an artist, not to think that you're helping the community. And often we all know the benefits and the wonderful releases people find in their own creativity can bring. It brings empowerment, voices, but you still have to be really, really careful of not to be put yourself on a pedestal, because some people don't want it.
We ended up in this theatre company, the General Will, and what happened was that the political questions about who we are and what right did we have to go round lecturing other people and things like that became very much the issue, and who one can represent. And we ended up having a big ding-dong battle between us about who can represent who in art, and the company ended up splitting many ways.
I think sort of working collectively, especially in the kind of capacity that Black Dogs was operating in, which was quite informal, meant that it often moves between something that doesn't have structure, or where you're trying to kind of critique the hierarchies and kind of the normative kind of processes that exist in kind of in not just the institutional art world, but in kind of institutions in general. And you're trying to find alternatives to that, and I would say that maybe the things that I've learned about myself through doing that is that actually I do find it hard to kind of commit myself fully to a purely non-hierarchical, decentralised kind of model, and sometimes I kind of feel like there needs to be some sort of structure to things, which is a very hard thing to deal with if you end up being the person who leads those kind of, or decides those structures a lot of the time. So that's a bit unpleasant, but I think we went into kind of something like Black Dogs thinking that it was a completely egalitarian kind of free, totally participatory, anyone can get involved kind of process, and that art could do that. And I think the good things that we've learned are that sometimes you can open stuff up to that, but the nasty things are that actually no matter how much you try to create those kind of scenarios, there's still going to be things blocking people's access, and there's still relationships to the things that you're trying to create alternatives to, whether that's kind of, I don't know, the art school or kind of capitalism or patriarchy. They're kind of they're still present in some way, so that can be quite a struggle, I suppose.
A lot of people in Canterbury are just really struggling on welfare and struggling with, as single parents with a whole load of kids, struggling to make ends meet and pay bills and things, and it's just really hard to get. It's really hard to value art, to say we'll put money into that when people were actually struggling to pay their own bills and things.
Some people thought that they could use the theatre company as a vehicle to go and lecture the working class. And we were sort of saying, well, no, actually, if you're looking at the community that is the working class, the theatre company should therefore be the plays done by the working class about their condition and what they want to do about it, and so on.
When you apparently seem to get rid of all structure, actually these really difficult sort of informal hidden ones come into play, which are worse. Which is an interesting question around sort of Arts Council funding as well, because it's kind of a lot of and why people have problems with kind of things like community arts, because they say, it's kind of restrictive, there's all these parameters around it, and it's kind of actually in the kind of non-state funded kind of art world or non-public funded art world, there's an equal amount of parameters and restrictions. They're just less transparent.
We used to get a lot of jobs in Parks Department working for local councils, and of course when when local councils face budget cuts from central government, often the first thing that goes is sort of entertainment and stuff like that. So that's why I started getting more involved in community art, because there I wasn't at the mercy of getting bookings from other people. We could fundraise ourselves, and fundraising is getting harder and harder, but it at least put some of the control back in our hands about putting in funding bids and then getting the money that way to do the work that I do.
The Arts Council are thinking differently about it. So yesterday I had a couple of really amazing moments where I actually thought, I can't believe I'm hearing this. And one was that the network where I was, it had a presentation from the two people who were responsible for the Creative People and Places programme, and they said because of this programme, it's changing the Arts Council from the inside. It's making people think differently about how you develop art with people in places, and for the purpose of changing every part of it. And that, I never thought I'd ever hear anything like that in my lifetime. So I was like goosebump territory, you know. And then the second thing I got was the same group of people had stood up and said, this really is making a difference, because what we're now doing is exploring what happens if you start with people, and explore what happens with art if you start with people, not the other way around, which traditionally they'd started with art and then were giving consideration to people. And of course, if you really believe in the practice of people in art, you have to start with the people, because they're the ones who are the creators of the art. The art doesn't just emerge out of nowhere.
The Arts Council of England brought out a paper and a policy document that said that they wanted to support community arts. And we said, well, what do you mean by community arts? Because as far as we're concerned, community arts are the art of the community, done by and for the community, not art that is imposed on the community.
That's what you could do, you see. You could be on the dole and be a musician or an artist. Like, and just call yourself it, even though you were just prattling around, you know, going to the pub with your friends. So, but in all reality, it did, you know, give people that space. Whereas now, I feel really sorry for like young people now, because it's just constant pressure, isn't it? Well, there's nothing to. You have to get work, don't you? Otherwise, you just see it's homeless people everywhere.
Why I think artists get squashed to a certain extent is because they endanger the system, you know, because they fight against it in a cerebral way, and you know, because they're seen as being can be seen as controversial and not adhering to the rules, you know. So it's like give children a voice or people a voice, you know. It's like that's the most powerful thing you can do for people.
I mean, the puppet making came about as a response to the recession, really.
Jobs are, there's been a lot of cuts, so it's quite fortunate to get work these days.
And my favourite form of theatre is where the whole community celebrate in the production, so that you don't have a distinction between the performers and the audience, but the whole community have the opportunity to become performers and join in the kind of celebration. It's almost seeing theatre as celebration and ritual rather than as purely performance to be seen by an audience.
You presume that actually what it will do, because they're so active in the questioning and the answering, that then it will lead to them having other chats about it when somebody else points something out or says something. You know, it's like how do you begin a conversation? It's great. Yeah. Power to you. Or empowering, whatever the words are. God. We've spent a long time discussing the word power. How can power be used how can the word stop being dirty?
It's been really difficult. It's been good, and it's not, you know, I think I was quite naive in the beginning, thinking, we'll go in with this great idea, and the community will just all rush and get involved. And actually, people have been quite suspicious. Like, why is this? What?
You know, because the government's whole idea of what art is they see it as a luxury. You know, oh yeah, you know, nice sitting there and doing little drawings and things like that. Whereas I think it's a really integral part of being a human being, and you know, and it's not an extra. You know, it's like it should be part of everybody's lives.
It's all about them. I don't touch it at all. Hopefully I go in, we start off just by talking actually, you know, because it takes a lot to gain people's trust. It's best to have a long job, which is like the one I've got at the moment, which has been just an amazing experience for me, and I think for all the women involved. Most of them have never drawn before, so at first we talked about that, you know, about that scariness of just putting a pencil onto a piece of paper, and because it's never been in their education that they've had any drawing, so they're amazing, they're so talented, you know, and yeah, it's been a total eye-opener to them what they've done, you know, and they're also confident. Plus that I like to kind of train people to teach other people as well, so now they're starting to, one woman in particular is going to start running a class there herself, so it'll be run by them. And there's also a fantastic poet being discovered. She's now the poet in residence there, which has come about because of this project. So it's not always just a straightforward thing like you go in and do some artwork and that's it. There's always lots of offshoots, you know, if it's a good successful one. Lots of offshoots and building of confidence, making friends, having fun, you know, politics, you know, just the discussions that we've had, you know, and it all goes into the artwork.
Because we don't work like we want to go in there and say we can build these great puppets and run this great parade in your estate. We came in at the invitation of the school, who said come and work on this parade. Now what we're doing is running these weekly classes and just seeing who out of the local community who wants to do circus skills, who wants to do art, and we're going back to square one almost and saying, well, yes, we're learning some stilt walking with you kids. The Bradford Festival's coming up in July. Do you want to be part of that? You know, or if you don't want to be part of that, what do you want to be part of?
Oh my God, who am I? What am I doing? You know, usual stuff. You know, you think the questions go away, but they don't. You know?
We almost fear the potential that we have, because it's a bit scary. It's a bit, you know, if we really lived out our lives to our fullest potential, what might that mean? You know, it's much easier to be a bit cowed, a bit kept under the thumb of whatever.
Why did the chicken cross the road? Because somebody put a road there.
To get to the other side, because he was an adventurer.
Because he wanted to bite the fox's backside.
To get to the other side is a bit too simple, isn't it, really? I'd rather think you don't know what's going to happen next. Why did the chicken cross the road? So it saw sunshine on the other side of the road. I don't know.
To get to the other side.
He just wanted to see what was there, really, and just wanted to see what was on the other side of the road, like everybody else does. You know, if you've got any adventure about you, you want to see what's going on the other side of the road, don't you?
Don't know. It might have something to do with eggs. Does it have something to do with which came first, the egg or the chicken? Is that like that must have something to do with human evolution, right? Which came first, Rhodes or chickens? Must have come before Rhodes, right? Eggs must have come before chickens, or did chickens come before eggs? Because if you didn't have Or am I on the totally on the wrong road? Anyway, if you didn't, if you didn't have an egg, you wouldn't ever have had a chicken. If you didn't have a chicken, you wouldn't get an egg, would you? And if you didn't have the chicken in the first place, you wouldn't have a road for the chicken to cross. And which came first, the road or the chicken?
Can roads not exist without chickens?
Yeah, roads can exist without chickens. Although I think chickens have probably existed longer than roads. There you go.